a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. Mental health is such a wonderful field to be involved in. And in our schooling, we are taught about human behavior, how relationships work and why, best practice approaches that support the theories behind our treatments, and the science that helps explain behaviors and our functioning. But mental health is also a business, and we are not typically taught much about the business side of things, really the business of the business. Things like how to even think about setting up a private practice, or how to get on insurance panels, or forming an LLC, IT issues, or how to think about the type of practice you'd like to have, or maybe the types of patients that would best fit your areas of competence and interest, let alone how to advertise or bill, not to mention some of the ethical and legal concerns that can arise in one's practice. Well, that's where Joe Sanok comes in. Joe is a creator behind the Practice of the Practice, which we will be speaking together about today. But let me tell you a little bit about Joe first. Joe is a speaker, a mental health counselor, business consultant, and podcaster. In 2012, Joe started the Practice of the Practice podcast, and it's become the #1 podcast for counselors in private practice, helping private practice clinicians find innovative ways to start and to grow and to scale their private practice. Joe's been featured in the Huffington Post, Psych Central, Reader's Digest, Bustle, and Yahoo News. He's a keynote speaker and author of 5 books. In fact, he's got a newly finished book called Thursdays Are the New Friday, being released this October. And we're going to be talking about that at the very end of our show. He's also been named a top therapist resource for podcasts, blogging, and consulting services. Joe is the owner and the founder of a group practice, Mental Health Wellness Counseling, in Traverse City, Michigan. And as you'll hear in our time today with him, he's got this great heart for his mental health colleagues and a real passion for them to experience their fullest potential as practitioners. So I'm really excited to have Joe with us today as we talk about the practice of the practice. Joe, welcome to our show.
Oh, I am so excited to be here. I'm such a fan of the show.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much. Well, hey, as we start out with Practice of the Practice, I'd love to hear just a little bit of bio around what situations in your life, both personally and professionally, were at play that contributed to you developing Practice of the Practice.
Oh, there are so many, and I could go back all the way to 2nd grade when I wrote a paper about why I wanted to be a psychologist. My dad was a school psychologist, and so the autonomy that he had was always inspiring to me. But I think that, when I was going through my undergraduate and graduate school, I worked in runaway shelters. I helped, angry teen boys quite a bit. And I just had this heart for helping people. And then when I started doing private practice, first as a contractor, and then eventually starting my own side gig just to pay off student loans, I quickly realized how little I knew about business. And I remember this moment where I was texting with a friend of mine who was a therapist who had gone out on her own. And I said to her, "Monica, your website is just beautiful. Like, how did you get that made? I don't even know how to start a website." And she said, "You could totally make it yourself." And I was like, "What? You can make a website? I don't know anything." And it was this moment of, there is so little that I know about running a business that I didn't even know I could make a website, let alone like make a good one. And so I started to really dig in. And at the time I was working at as a foster care supervisor, and then eventually a community college as a counselor. And just, it was addictive to see that this thing that I had always thought was ugly and slimy, the world of business and every Scrooge McDuck kind of thing out there, that if you make money, you're a bad person, and you can't be a social worker or a counselor and make money. To see that really money is just a magnifier. If you're a terrible person, you have more ability to be terrible if you make money. And if you're a good person, that's not going to change if you make money. You're going to still want to help the world. And so as I discovered things, I just got sucked into business books and business podcasts. And then eventually it clicked. There's nothing out there for people in private practice right now. And I had just finished reading the book Guerrilla Marketing. And he talked about how back in the early days of the tire industry, all the tires were exactly the same. There were no differentiators between different tires. And then one company added like a millimeter to their tire, and then they named themselves the longest lasting tire because it was a millimeter more than all the other tires. And then someone else added different treads and said #1 off-road tire. And so I started looking, where is nobody talking right now? And I went onto podcasts and I looked around and I typed in counseling and private practice. I did all this searching to see if there were any good podcasts. The American Counseling Association was the only one at the time that had a podcast, and it had been dormant for, I think, 6 months when I was looking at starting a podcast. So on day one, I was the #1 podcast for counselors in private practice.
Congratulations.
And then even if, right. And yeah, even if someone takes over that position, I can be the oldest podcast for counselors in private practice. But really, I just entered into that space as a co-learner, as someone that said, I'm reading this book, here's how I'm applying it to my practice. Or I'd interview someone and say, honestly, I've never heard of a KPI. What is a key performance indicator? Teach me. And I was a co-learner. And we're now 550 some episodes into the show. And there was a point when people started reaching out to me and saying, it seems like you know a lot. Like, would you do consulting? And a lot formed after that we can talk about. But that idea of approaching it as, I just want to be a co-learner here and share how I'm applying these principles to the therapy world. And now we have a massive team of consultants and people that support folks in private practice. But initially it just started as, I didn't learn any of this in grad school. I need to do some quick learning if I actually want to be successful in this field.
Yeah, really good. Really good. So this practice of the practice that you're developing here, it's really the business of the business, as I mentioned before, helping people grow and think about their practice. But it isn't simply for folks starting out in the mental health practice, but it has assistance for those that have been out there for a while as well. Walk us just through some of the offerings of practice of the practice and how practitioners in the various stages of their career can benefit from your company's resources and consultation opportunities.
Yeah. So we really think through, where are people at in their journey and what's going to be most helpful. And so when you're first getting started, you don't usually have a whole lot of money. And so you want free resources. So we start with, our podcast is free. We have a free 28-step checklist for people starting a practice over at practicethepractice.com/start. And we walk people through things totally free. And then kind of the next step up is we have the 1-year practice plan. And the 1-year practice plan is an email series. It's 52 emails every single week. It's $17 for people. And that walks them through just, in your first year of practice, what do you need to do? And we used to offer that for, I think, $150. And then we would sell like one a month. And then we dropped it to 17. And now we sell hundreds a month. So it's great. So then kind of that's for people that really want to do it themselves. They don't want to invest much money, but they have the time and the energy to put into it. The next step from there is next level practice. And so next level practice is this amazing community of over 200 practitioners that, from the moment that they say to themselves, I want to start a private practice, all the way until they say, I think I want to add a clinician to my practice. That's the sweet spot for next level practice. And so we have a very active Facebook group. We have live events every month. We bring in experts that they can ask questions of around particular topics, whether it's attorneys, or we have people like Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas, or Dr. Julie Schwartz-Gottman is going to be one of our experts soon. And we bring them in for an hour and do Q&A. They're in small groups of around 10 where they support each other and have hot seats. And we find that the people that are in that, they start usually with wanting a solo practice, but they get full so fast. I mean, usually it's 3 to 4 months, but when they go from 0 to completely full, that people that have never thought of a group practice are saying, oh my gosh, like I have all these anxious kids that are coming to see me and I can't see them. And I feel a certain commitment to my community. I got to keep this going. So then the next step up is we have group practice launch, which Allison Pigeon and Whitney Owens run that. They're 2 amazing group practice owners. And it's a 6-month program that we open twice a year, where they then kind of walk through going from having no one working for you to having your first hire, your first W-2 or your first 1099. They take all the worry, frustration out of it so that, in that 6 months, you just go from 0 to 1. So then after that, we have group practice boss, and all of this is on the website, or, we have a live person on the website. If you have questions that can just tell you kind of where to go, if you're listening and saying, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. But group practice boss is a membership community aimed at people that have at least made their first hire. I would say most people enter when they're at 2 or 3 people that they've hired. And we have mega group practices in there of 20 plus people, and that's all around running a group practice. What often happens though, as we coach and do one-on-one, so all of our consultants, we do one-on-one as well as these group programs, is people realize you know what, I was made for more than just a group practice. So they start to kind of rein in their schedule a little bit. Maybe they were doing 25 clients a week and they say, you know what, I want to take Fridays off, or I want to stop working evenings. And they start handing off those clients, or they stop taking those new clients. And then they say, who are my very favorite clients to work with? And they start to realize that their skill set is so much broader than just a group practice. So then that's where we often help people launch a podcast, go into public speaking, writing books, and exit their private practice if they want to. And so really from the moment someone says, I want to start a practice, all the way to, I want to go big and national, we kind of have things that we offer all the way through to help people.
Really good. I want to talk about both those, kind of poles, if you will, those starting out, those that are kind of maybe moving into kind of the sage part of their careers. Let's start with folks. I would encourage you to go on to the Practice site. They've got this great 5-minute video, just as an introduction, as a start. It says how to start a private practice in one day for under $200. And in fact, Joe, you get people started for under 200. I think it's 196 is what you get them started with, if I remember right. It's awesome. It's such a great video for those newly coming into the field, because it helps people think about and to smartly plan for the basics in their practice, just ways to start thinking. In general, just as people are starting out, I'd like to ask you, Joe, if you were to take a 10,000-foot view with folks that are newly coming into this field, what would you recommend they consider in terms of how to think about and conceptualize their practice?
I mean, I would start with, you don't realize how much of an expert you already are. Yeah. Maybe you've worked at a CMH, or you've worked at Wraparound, or at a college, and you're surrounded with people that are kind of similar to you. You don't understand just how magnificent you are until you really get out into the world and start teaching people, and their minds are blown. If we just look at the stats alone, only 8% of the US has a master's degree. So imagine you're in a socially distanced situation outside where there's 100 people, and 8 of those have master's degrees. What are the odds that one of those is a doctor, a lawyer, master's level accountant, chiropractor? Most likely, in a group of 100 people with no additional training than what you have right now, you are the smartest person in the room every single time. Now, of course, if you go to, the Gottman Institute or something like that, you're surrounded by a bunch of peers, and then you compare yourself and say, I'm not as good as them. But with average people, you're almost always the smartest person in the room. So, I mean, if you can grasp onto that, you're unstoppable, because then you enter into your private practice, not from I have to prove myself, or I have all this imposter syndrome, or you get paralyzed by perfection. And every blog post takes 5 hours because you're worried that it's not going to be up to APA standards. Right. And instead you say, you know what do people need? Okay, there's a hurting mom or dad whose kid keeps getting kicked out of school, keeps getting in trouble, and they just want their kid to have a good shot at life. That hurting parent doesn't care about your citations. They care about you saying, here's a couple ways to be more consistent in your parenting. Here's a couple ways to look at your son or daughter's brain. Here's a couple ways to look at trauma in a way that is approachable, is understandable, and doesn't sound like jargon. So once you're able to just lay down that professional ego, it's just amazing to see what people on the front end, when they first start, are able to do, because instead of taking 5 hours per blog, they take 20 minutes. They just let it flow, and they start networking, and there's not that fear of rejection anymore. And instead you just realize, I know what I know, and I need to go out into the world and serve the world in a way that is completely different than my peers.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Behavioral and mental health professionals provide critical support to our communities in a time when our communities need it more than ever. But they need support too, to continue their education, to connect with colleagues, and to advance their career. And so we've launched Triad, the hub for behavioral and mental health professionals. At Triad, you'll find education, community, and career resources for both current and aspiring behavioral and mental health professionals, all curated specifically for you and all for free. Visit us at hellotriad.com/BHT to register for your free professional account. Again, that's hellotriad.com/BHT. Come join the community today.
That's a great reframe. A lot of times we think, well, if I think that way, isn't that going to be arrogant or, big-headed or narcissistic? No, that's having a strong ego, meaning that I have a clear sense of who I am, what I've got to offer, and how I can be a benefit to people. And if we can start thinking in that way, in fact, oftentimes when I'm working with early career practitioners coming into the field or with students, I really like to help them identify what are their inherent natural skills, their gifts, their talents, their abilities, and their true areas of interest. And I encourage them to develop a professional life, ideally that's aligned with that design. How do you find the folks that you're helping through practice of the practice? How do you help them become more introspective in determining their best alignment with the way that they could practice and be successful and really be fulfilled by it?
Yeah, whether we're talking about someone's private practice or them starting a podcast, one thing I'll ask them is, if you're having a glass of wine with a friend and you're just talking about stuff and it feels easy, what do you talk about? Very rarely is it, what I love doing is sitting on my back deck and really talking about trauma for like 4 hours. I talk about trauma with my friends. I ooze trauma. So what is it about trauma that you're interested in? Well, it's not trauma. I'm interested in spirituality and I'm interested in people that challenge themselves. And did you see that person that climbed Mount Everest? That was insane. And if you can tap into what's the story behind the story here? What's the joy behind the front joy? That's where people start to realize that they're not just limited to a private practice, that they're actually doing something that is a lot bigger than just their private practice. Their practice may be a manifestation of that right now, but then there's not that attachment to, I just have to stick with private practice. They're free to play outside of that. Maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's writing a book or a podcast, or maybe it is staying in a private practice for the whole life of your professional career. But if they can tap into those kind of natural inclinations and understand how they're naturally wired, it helps in so many different ways. And I mean, we're in such a phase of humanity that you can discover those things. I mean, whether it's, knowing your Enneagram type or, doing the Strength Finder, or whatever variety of different batteries there are that are out there to help you figure out who you are. The more you do that, the more that's going to help you shape your business within the values that you hold dear. So for example, I'm a Enneagram 3 achiever. If you're not familiar with the Enneagram, that's totally fine. But, basically I'm a person that I like to achieve things, and there's good things about that. And there's bad things about that. There's times that I need to keep that in check more than others. So knowing that about myself, when I structured my group practice, I didn't want to have another family, another bunch of relationships where we're huggy and having barbecues and having drinks after work. I had a baby at the time. I had a wife that was staying home. I wanted to come and work and I wanted to go home. And so in the group practice, the people I hired, they were of that same mindset. That didn't mean we didn't like each other. That didn't mean that we were rude to each other. But what it meant was, we know that I'm not expecting to stand around the water cooler for 2 hours after I'm done with clients to just chat. And so I knew that about myself. And then my practice was able to achieve in different ways. Now, each person brought different types of strengths. Some maybe were a little more friendly, or they maybe were more into the community side, or maybe they wanted more information. So I needed to be able to give that to them while also staying true to myself. Now, there's other people that say, I want my practice to be a second family. I want it to be that, we write notes to each other and we do Secret Santa. And okay, that's awesome. I love that. You know that about yourself, and I would never join your practice. And that's okay. That's okay, because then your practice is a reflection of who you are in a way that nobody else can mirror.
Yeah. I think that's basically right there. It's aligning what you do with your design. And so you're going to get the most fulfillment out of it. You're going to be the most successful with it. And it's going to be really, really reassuring that I am doing what I love and what I'm designed to be doing. You're also talking too about opportunities. I want to talk about opportunities in just a moment, but building off what you just said also, we're in a field where the typical thinking is, in order to make more money, I have to work more hours, but you're helping folks through practice of the practice to think about and identify and to generate income without necessarily having to increase their billable hours. Go back over again some of the ways you're helping people think about this and do this.
Yeah. So I think just to differentiate that, when you make money by working more hours, that's called a job. That's not called a business. So have you given yourself a job? That means that if you're sick, you don't make money. If you aren't sick, then you make money. We want to develop a business. And that doesn't mean you have to have a group practice, but the easiest way for most clinicians is to add some clinicians to your practice for your overflow. So that's one way, is you bring in 1099s or W-2s, depending on the employment law in your state, to either match your exact type of client you're seeing. So if you're seeing women in midlife that are transitioning out of a marriage, maybe you bring in other people that help with that. or you look for ones that would complement that. So maybe you bring in a play therapist. So then the women that you're seeing, their kids can see the play therapist, or maybe you bring in someone that specializes in men's issues of transition. And so that's a very easy way to do that. A lot of people, I think, overthink a group practice. It's really not that hard if you have those basic systems set up for yourself. You want to just make it really easy on yourself to make those referrals and figure out kind of what the percentage split will be, or, if they're paid just a flat amount.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other things. We have something that we talk about called the sandwich approach. And so if we think about your client as the middle of the sandwich, so they come in for a particular issue. So divorce, they come in for divorce. What's the front end of that sandwich? Before people are ready to do therapy with you, what do they need? Well, they may need some coaching on becoming your own person. They may need some coaching on finding your voice. They may need some coaching on separation before divorce. And so thinking through those opportunities, that could be an e-course, that could be a newsletter, that could be a membership community, that could be some sort of group coaching program, that could be a podcast. And so all those things then have ways that you can make money off of those. You can have affiliate links, you can have, a cost for those e-courses. You can include those e-courses into your counseling for free. And now people may pay a higher private pay amount because you have a whole package where you can get my 10 e-courses in addition to my counseling for this price, and it'll save you 25%. But then on the other side of the sandwich, we want to look at, well, when someone leaves counseling with you, well, what do they need? So say someone's through a divorce, they're done with kind of the major trauma of it, they're rebuilding their life. What are e-courses or supports or membership communities that would be helpful after that? So then when you start thinking that way, your current clients become customers on the front end and the back end, but not because you're just, milking them for more money, but you're then saying, through the lifetime of my client, for the year before they ever want to work with me and the year or two after, what are all the services that I could offer at different price points for those things? The thing about doing that also is then, because it's not direct counseling and it's not kind of under your licensing laws, you can then level up beyond just your community. And so these e-courses, these teachings, these membership communities, all of those things typically can transcend your state borders. Of course, talk to your own attorney and accountant, all about that. But you're going to make sure that you can transcend beyond the therapeutic work that you're doing. And then you can monetize things. When someone buys your e-course and you're asleep, you just made $300.
Yes.
That flow then becomes part of your different income. So then if there's a dip in the market where maybe people aren't seeing you for individual counseling as much, you then have these multiple streams of income that can help you be able to sustain or even grow even faster.
Yeah, that's really good. Really good. It doesn't always have to be about additional billable hours, does it?
No, not at all.
Yeah. You're talking about earlier about how to help those coming into the field newly from a 10,000 foot view to really conceptualize what they bring. And it is significant. Folks, pardon the interruption, but we'll conclude this discussion in our next episode. I want to thank my guest, Joe Sanok. For more information about Practice of the Practice, their podcasts, online courses, or free resources to grow your private practice, visit practiceofthepractice.com. All one word. That's practiceofthepractice.com. And lastly, we want to thank you, our listeners, for tuning in. And we look forward to having you join us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Tribe Network, all rights reserved.